The jungle does not feel alive in a natural way. It feels aware. Dense walls of green stretch in every direction, swallowing sound and light, while the heat presses down on the small American outpost as if the air itself is weight. Sweat soaks through uniforms, mixing with dirt and exhaustion that has already begun to settle into every movement. Nothing here feels stable, not even the silence. Inside the outpost, a radio operator keeps attempting contact with command, but all he receives is static. No coordinates, no responses, just an endless, meaningless noise that slowly replaces hope with something heavier. Each failed transmission confirms what no one wants to say out loud. They are no longer connected to anyone outside the forest. Then, somewhere beyond the trees, a sound breaks through the heat. It is sharp, brief, and impossible to locate. Not enough to identify, but enough to interrupt everything. Conversations stop instantly, hands tighten round weapons. Eyes shift toward the jungle line, searching for something that refuses to reveal itself. And in that moment, the realization settles in completely. Whatever is out there is already close, already watching, and the outpost is no longer part of any larger system. Communication has failed. Reinforcement will not come. Only the jungle remains, closing in silently around them. Inside the small American outpost, life continues under a constant pressure that no one can fully ignore. The structure is a forward observation point hidden deep within the forests of Cuba, near Santiago de Cuba, operating in the uncertain aftermath of global conflict in 1946. Its mission is simple on paper: observe, report, and maintain control over a strategic stretch of terrain. In reality, it feels like being abandoned at the edge of the world. The radio has been silent for hours. Every attempt to reach command ends the same way: static, empty, lifeless noise. No coordinates, no instructions, no confirmation that anyone is even listening anymore. The silence is not just technical failure. It starts to feel intentional, as if the forest itself has cut them off from everything beyond its borders. The commander moves through the outpost, checking positions and scanning the dense jungle line that never seems to change. No matter how long you stare at it, the soldiers remain disciplined. But tension is starting to replace structure. No reinforcements are coming. No updates will arrive. Only uncertainty grows stronger with every passing minute. And before the situation unfolds further, take a second to drop a like and subscribe if you enjoy realistic military storytelling like this. And comment if you were inside this outpost, with no communication and limited supplies. What would be your plan to survive? In 1946, a small American military observation unit is deployed deep within the forests of Cuba, near Santiago de Cuba. The outpost is not designed for combat, but for surveillance, monitoring movement across strategic terrain in a region still unstable after years of global conflict. Its role is to observe, record, and report any activity that could indicate rising instability in the area. The unit belongs to the United States Army, operating under strict observation protocols. Their mission is considered low intensity, relying heavily on radio communication and scheduled reporting cycles rather than direct engagement. The outpost itself is small, isolated, and intentionally placed deep within the jungle to maintain visual control over surrounding routes, without attracting attention. Unbeknownst to the unit, local armed forces in the region have begun organizing against foreign military presence in isolated zones. These groups see the continued occupation of strategic observation points as interference in internal sovereignty. The outpost, though not a combat installation, is interpreted as part of a broader control network that must be disrupted. The attackers are not a single conventional army, but coordinated Cuban resistance elements operating across difficult terrain. Their advantage lies in numbers, familiarity with the jungle environment, and the ability to move without relying on fixed infrastructure. Their objective is not territorial expansion, but the removal of isolated foreign positions that provide intelligence advantage. Tensions escalate when reconnaissance confirms the presence of the outpost as an active observation node for the attacking forces. Leaving such a position operational represents a strategic risk, as it allows continuous tracking of movement across the region. The decision is made to neutralize it before it can provide further intelligence support. Inside the outpost, the American unit continues routine operations, unaware of how quickly their position has shifted from observation to target. Reports are still being logged, patrols rotated, and radio checks performed according to standard procedure. There is no indication that their status has changed in the eyes of external forces already moving through the jungle. The surrounding forest provides complete concealment for approaching forces. Movement is controlled, silent, and distributed across multiple directions to prevent detection. The terrain itself becomes an advantage, allowing attackers to close distance without revealing their numbers or positions until contact becomes unavoidable. By the time any shift in the situation is recognized internally, the outpost is no longer simply an observation point. It has become a fixed position inside an active operational environment, one where it is no longer the observer, but the observed. The first sign of engagement does not come from sight, but from sound cutting through the dense forest canopy. Sharp, irregular cracks echo across the perimeter of the outpost. The jungle distorts every echo, making it impossible to determine direction, distance, or the number of attackers involved. American soldiers moving into defensive positions along the perimeter, but the situation is already imbalanced. They are fixed inside a small, exposed structure, while the attackers remain hidden in dense vegetation with full environmental advantage. Visibility is almost non-existent beyond a few meters, forcing defense based on sound alone. The first rounds strike the outpost itself, tearing through wooden sections of the structure and forcing immediate disruption of formation. Almost immediately, several defenders are hit during the initial exchange. The wounded collapse within the perimeter, and the defensive line breaks before it can stabilize. Medical response is immediate but constrained. There is no safe rear position, no evacuation route, and no external support. The wounded are pulled behind partial cover while others continue returning fire under the same incoming pressure, splitting attention between survival and defense. Return fire begins, but it is fragmented and uncertain. Soldiers fire into sections of jungle based only on muzzle flashes or brief movement cues that vanish instantly. The attackers remain unseen, shifting positions quickly to confirm any consistent pattern. The pressure increases in short bursts. Fire comes from multiple angles, then stops abruptly, only to resume from a different direction. This prevents any stabilization of the defensive perimeter, forcing constant repositioning under fire. With casualties increasing and no visual confirmation of enemy strength or position, the defenders remain at a structural disadvantage. Confined within a limited perimeter, they are forced into reactive survival while the attackers control movement through concealment and terrain. As the exchange briefly slows, the outpost is left damaged and unstable. The attackers remain unidentified, but their control over the engagement is already evident, as the defenders are forced to hold a position they cannot properly see beyond. After the initial contact fades, there is no sense of relief, only suspension. The remaining defenders do not relax their positions. As the forest continues to feel active even in silence, every branch movement and distant crack is treated as a potential return of fire, keeping the entire outpost locked in a constant state of readiness. The wounded soldiers worsen the internal strain. With no evacuation possibility and no external medical support, treatment remains improvised and unstable. Resources are diverted between maintaining defensive positions and keeping the injured stable, enough to survive the next potential engagement. The outpost begins to function interdivided. Priorities. The remaining defensive structure is adjusted again. Gaps created during the engagement are reinforced, but the forest offers no reliable framework for anticipating where the next attack may come from. Every adjustment is temporary, made under the assumption that pressure could resume from any direction without warning. Ammunition management becomes increasingly critical. Supplies are not yet depleted, but usage rates rise rapidly under stress-driven firing. Every round is now treated as a measured decision, rather than immediate reaction, as uncertainty replaces confirmed targets. No one knows how long the situation will last or whether resupply is even possible. Communication remains completely absent. The radio continues to operate, but only produces static without variation. Attempts to reestablish contact are now procedural rather than hopeful. The lack of response has shifted from being a problem to being an accepted condition of operations. The attackers do not reappear in full force, but their presence is still felt through intermittent environmental pressure, occasional movement beyond the perimeter forces, realignment of defensive focus. Even without engagement, this prevents the defenders from fully stabilizing or shifting into recovery. Fatigue begins to accumulate across the entire unit. The combination of heat, stress, and sustained alertness reduces reaction speed and increases hesitation in decision-making. Coordination becomes tighter in structure but slower in execution, as every action now requires additional confirmation. The outpost remains operational, but it has lost its original function. It is no longer a stable observation position. It has become a strained defensive holdout, operating without communication, without certainty, and under constant expectation that another engagement will come without warning. The final phase begins not with scattered fire, but with coordinated movement. For the first time, the pressure from the forest becomes structured and deliberate, pushing through the perimeter in a way that signals full control of the engagement. The defenders inside the outpost are forced into tighter positions as the boundary they once held begins to collapse inward. The remaining American soldiers of the United States Army attempt to stabilize what is left of their defensive line, but the structure is no longer viable. Gaps created in earlier exchanges are now exploited from multiple directions at once. Movement inside the outpost becomes restricted, with every position exposed to overlapping angles of pressure. The wounded and exhausted soldiers can no longer maintain effective rotation between positions. Fatigue and injuries limit mobility, and the ability to respond coherently across the perimeter is reduced to isolated reactions. The outpost stops functioning as a coordinated unit and becomes a collection of separated defensive points under constant stress. Then the attackers finally emerge from the forest. Instead of remaining hidden, the Cuban forces advance directly into the perimeter in coordinated groups, using their numerical advantage and familiarity with the terrain to close distance rapidly. The jungle no longer conceals them, it releases them. Their presence fills the gaps that earlier fire had created but never fully revealed. The defenders attempt a final, disorganized response, but the engagement has already shifted beyond recovery. The attackers are now inside the perimeter, controlling movement and cutting off any remaining tactical options. Resistance becomes fragmented and unsustainable under direct close-range pressure. Within moments, the situation reaches its conclusion. Surrounded and outnumbered, the remaining American soldiers are forced to lower their weapons. Hands are raised inside the damaged structure, as the realization sets in that no reinforcement will arrive and no counteraction remains viable. The attackers secure the outpost without further resistance. Weapons are collected, positions are taken, and control of the structure is fully transferred through physical occupation rather than continued combat. The outpost falls silent. What remains is not destruction, but surrender, the final acknowledgement that isolation, exhaustion, and numerical superiority have determined the outcome long before any formal end to the conflict. Silence settles over the outpost as the jungle remains unchanged, dense and indifferent to what has ended within it. The Cuban forces move through the structure with control, securing the area as resistance fully collapses. For the remaining American soldiers, surrender becomes the only option. With no communication restored and no external support arriving, the outcome is final in isolation. If you enjoyed the cinematic war story, leave a like, subscribe, and comment if you were inside this outpost with no communication and limited supplies. What would be your plan to survive?